Hello everyone, my name is Jen and welcome to the Book Refuge. Hi my friends and welcome to another recommendations video, and today we're gonna get a little bit creative, a little bit fun with it. I mean, I always try to be creative and fun, but this video is actually based on an Instagram trend that I saw, and I've actually done this Instagram trend a few times in different ways because I do have a pretty I'm pretty proud of my Instagram, how I've built it up in the past few years. So I always have that link down below if you're interested there. I have book recommendations that go up every day of the week on there pretty much. But there was this trend going around that was like book recs from A to Z, and there was different twists people were taking on it. And so I did it like in a regular version, and then I also did a historical romance version. And I thought I would do that for you guys here and put in a video because I obviously have a lot more viewers here than I do there, and also I know a lot more of you are interested in historical romance than there. So what my goal with this is I was able to go A to Y. By the way, I wasn't able to go all the way to Z, but we're gonna label this A to Z because it's a bit snappier. And I tried to not double up on any authors, and I believe that I succeeded. You know, I'm looking at it and I think I have 25 different authors, but we'll see if when I start talking about them, I'm like, oh, you doubled that up. I'm not promising I'm perfect, but the goal with this is going to be to recommend you 25 different books by 25 different authors. And I tried to put in some that I don't talk about as much. And there is two books included that I have not read that are kind of TBR for me as well. But they're both by authors that are very well loved. So I wanted to include a book, you know, again, this is going to be kind of a like, not an intro to historical romance, but you know, if you haven't read much of it, really we're going to touch on a vast array of them in this one, instead of some of my more like, you know, niche videos where I'm like historical romance with arranged marriage or historical romance with dukes, which I also have videos like that if you want to go check it out. I have a historical romance playlist, you know, as well as having dark romance and all those other things. And so this is just, there's no other rhyme or reason to this than to be able to go through 25 different authors. So without further ado, we'll get started. Knock on wood here, I'm going to try not to make this one too obnoxious because I'm not going to speak too deeply about each of the books, because since there's 25, that's a lot more than my normal 10 recs that I put on a video. So I'm going to try to just tell you what the tropes are, how many books by the author that I've read, and, you know, just like how highly I recommend them basically. And then as always, I'll have links down below to all of these books so you can check them out for yourself. And the good part about them being historical romance is a lot of them you're going to be able to find at your library, and there's usually audiobooks for all of these. And yeah, I've already wasted enough time on the intro, so let's dive in. We are starting off with All Through the Night by Connie Brockway, and this is actually the most recent historical romance I read. I did change this up a bit from my Instagram post just so that I could change out some of the recommendations, and this is one of those. So I'll actually be talking more in depth about this in book club on November 19th. But as a quick over the top, this was the first Connie Brockway that I've read, so I don't have more to recommend than this one. But I believe this one takes place during the Regency period. Because we do, yes, it is. It's in 1817, because we do have a mad King George in this one that we actually see a little bit of, which was interesting. But in this one, we have a Anne Wilder, who is a widow by day, and by night, she's a masked thief that preys on the social elite and is kind of like stealing from them to give to the poor, basically, is what she's doing. And then our hero, his name is Colonel Jack Seward, and he is sent to kind of find this thief because she may have stolen something very important to important people. And he very early on, like, it's one of the first interactions in this book, he actually discovers that this is a woman. So he's bound and determined to capture her, not only because it's his job, but he also is now very attracted and intrigued by this woman. And so he definitely wants to get his hands on her. So Connie Brockway is our author for A. The Light May Definitely Come For Me. It was beautifully foggy and the perfect lighting. And as usual, once I sit my ass down to film, the brightest sunshine that exists wants to come out. And that is frustrating to me. But anyway, moving right along. We have Beauty and the Beast by Lorraine Heath. I know there's so many books called that, but this is from Lorraine Heath's Sins for All the Seasons series. And this one is near the end of the series, actually, but I adore this one because this one is Aletha Sandwick. And she's a lady, she's supposed to marry a wealthy lord until there's a betrayal that leaves her family penniless. And so she wants to seduce and learn as much as she can to obtain power over men of society. And she has the perfect teacher in mind whose name is Beast. So we have Benedict Truelove, who this whole series is about the Truelove siblings who are all adopted. They're actually all siblings who their family gave them up at birth, and this one wonderful woman adopted all of them. And so it's that classic thing of she goes to him for seduction lessons, but the only one who ends up being seduced is he himself. So Lorraine Heath, I have read many, many of her books. She is a top author for me. So it was very difficult to pick just one of hers, but I highly recommend, honestly, any series by her. A favorite series of mine is the Scandalous Gentlemen of St. James, or the Scoundrels of St. James. I don't know, that's one of my favorite series from her. For C, I'm pulling these from the stack behind me. So for C, there is The Charm School by Susan Wiggs. Now, this is the only book by Susan Wiggs that I've read, and I actually read this as part of the historical readathon that, not the OG one, but the one that Maggie did. You know, we just did the Phantom Readathon this year. She did a historical based one last year, and this was one of the books I read for it. This was recommended by a viewer for years and years and years, and during that readathon I tried to read as many as I could. Anyway, so this one is about Ryan Calhoun and Isadora Peabody. And so Isadora Peabody, she actually sneaks aboard the Silver Swan that's bound for Rio. So she snuck onto the ship. Now she thinks this ship is all in tip-top shape, and I think that her family has things to do with it. Sorry, it's been quite a while since I read this. But the thing is, he actually is on a secret mission, and so not only is having her there looking over his shoulder inconvenient in just he's trying to do his regular job, he also has a secret job he's trying to do, and having her there is going to make it very dangerous. But the crew on his ship end up teaching her some charms of a lady, because she's always been kind of the overlooked sibling and all these things. But she ends up, this is a found family type thing, and there are some pretty daring things they end up getting into with this. This was actually a pretty emotional story, and I definitely want to read more in this. I did end up snagging the ebook of book 2 in this series. I just have never got around to reading more of it. But Susan Wiggs, one I never knew about until I read her for a readathon. Okay, for D, we have Dearest Rogue by Elizabeth Hoyt. Of course, we had to include her in here. Elizabeth Hoyt is also up high on my list, and I can happily say I've read every book she currently has out. I can't say that about too many of the older authors. I can say that about some newer ones, of course. And she finally has a new book coming out at the end of this year. It has been literally years, and that book has been pushed and canceled and all these things, and it's actually coming. But anyway, Dearest Rogue is a part of her Maiden Lane series, which is top tier. I have so many favorites. This was actually a 6-star read the year that I read it. And this one is an age gap. It's a bodyguard. It's a lady and a retired officer, Captain James Trevelyan. And he's much older than her. He's also injured, so he walks with a cane. He has a partially crippled leg, but he has made her bodyguard. And right from the beginning, Phoebe, who is blind, and that's another reason she needs a bodyguard. She's also the sister of a very important guy, but she also can't see, so she needs some extra help, as it were, and protection. She is very attracted to James a lot of the times, and he is attracted to her too, but this is his charge. She's also much younger than him. She is a lady, and she's just very taboo for him. But when things start to get really dangerous for her, he kidnaps her and takes her to his home. So one of the things I want to say about this is that let's make this crossover, okay? If you like Broken Vow, okay, by Sophie Lark, try Dearest Rogue, okay? Just try it. Her writing, very fun. This is a very sexy book. There's a good mystery in it. I know it's in the middle of a series, but sometimes we just need that book that's our entry point into a new subgenre, okay? Like, just give this one a go. Listen to the audiobook. They're all narrated by a wonderful narrator. And this romance is just so beautiful, okay? It definitely has a reluctant hero. But yeah, he ends up bringing her to his home to keep her safe. And Phoebe kind of uses that time with him to like convince him that we would be really good together. And he's like, I'm old, I'm crippled, I'm all these things. And she's like, you're exactly what I want. So I would appreciate if you stopped being so down on yourself. But that is Dearest Rogue from Elizabeth Hoyt. Okay. Next for E, we have, of course, Eyes of Silver, Eyes of Gold, or more commonly seen by this horrid cover. I know, every time I show this book, I make people a bit jealous. My lovely friend Mel, she binds books and will make new covers for books sometimes. So this is one of those books that she did that for me. Okay, so this is, as I will say, this is an AI cover that she did, but this wasn't for sale. She did it just for me as a gift. And when you see this hideous cover, you'll understand why I love it. But anyway, enough of that. I've talked about it every time I hold it up. But Eyes of Silver, Eyes of Gold is by Ellen O'Connell. And this is a very dark start to this story with Anne and Colt. Colt is actually half Native American, and so he's literally called a savage by his half siblings. And he was very much loved by his father. Him and his younger sister were. They were both from his second marriage to this Native American woman, but that has made him an outcast. And because of what he looks like and just certain quirks about him, he's really treated like an outcast. And then we have Anne, who he actually knew when he was young from school. And in the beginning of this book, she's trying to run away because her father's trying to force her into a marriage, and he's gonna help her out, but her father and some of his men catch up to her before they can escape, and Cord and her are actually beaten very badly. And then like they leave them for dead basically, but they live. And one of the other things they'd done before they left them is they actually married Cord and Annie together. And so now she's like, they've lived and we're married and we're staying that way. And yeah, it's very complicated. This book will tear your hearts out, okay? It will rip your heart out, but it also is so beautiful because they both find a love that like they deserve, and they also change the opinions of some people around them, which always feels good. And I do very much plan to read more of Ellen O'Connell. I've had other books of hers recommended to me by viewers, but it is difficult. Even knowing how much I love that book, it's still hard to pick up other books that have such a hideous cover because it's very difficult. Okay, we are a visual people, and no matter how much we say it's what's on the inside that matters. That doesn't happen with book covers. It takes a lot of convincing for people. All right, for F, we have Fallen by Celeste Bradley. Okay, this author is one I read when I was like an older teen, and I binged a lot of her books back then. I realized that I was behind on a few of her books a few years ago and looked her up, and she actually hasn't written much after those books that I had seen. But this one is one of her standalones, and I believe it's one of her earliest books that she wrote. But at one point I had read every book written by her as well, except those very newest ones. She writes a lot of like not quite Victorian, in between Regency and Victorian era books. And there's a lot of like spies and espionage stuff going on in the wars at that time and everything. But this one, I am going to read the back because it's been a long time, but I wanted to include her because I feel like she gets forgotten, and particularly her, The Heiress Brides, The Royal Four, and The Liars Club. I really love those books, so I highly recommend. But this one's a standalone, and so this one has a spinster named Izzy, and she can only dream of finding a husband who will love her and have passion for her. And then there's Lord Julian Blackworth, who he mistakes Izzy's room for his, and he falls into her bed and into her wildest dreams. And so when the household discovers him in her room, Izzy pretends that Julian is her fiance. And once he spends time playing the part, Julian finds himself falling for the feisty beauty. But how can Izzy trust his feelings are real when she won't end up being branded fallen? So there's really high stakes for the woman in this one, because he makes a mistake and she goes along with it, and it could lead to her ruin. So yeah, I read that one a long time ago, and I love Celeste Bradley's stories. Okay, for G, we have one of the two that I haven't read, but this author needs to be included in a list when you're talking about 25 different historical romance authors, or you're just not doing a good service to her. This is the late, great Joanna Lindsey, and here I have Gentle Rogue, which is one of her most popular books. I do want to read this one. It's on my bucket list. I do have a lot of the first editions of her books. They're absolutely beautiful. And this is the one with a gorgeous clinch cover. Here we are. That fantastic cover. This one was recovered recently. It's been recovered many times. That's what happens with these. But there's just something about this Fabio cover. Okay, you can't disagree with it. So let's read the back of this one, because I have a vague recollection what it's about, but I haven't read this one. So it says, her heart trampled and torn, innocent Georgiana Anderson was desperate to return home to America, leaving her sorrows on England's shores. She defiantly boarded the gentleman's ship, the Maiden Anne, disguised as a cabin boy. We love to see it. Never dreaming she'd be forced into intimate solitude, to servitude, to the irrepressible rake, Captain James Mallerie. Yeah, this is a part of the Mallerie family. Here we go. A handsome ex-pirate, two different words. The black sheep of a proud and tempestuous family. All the words they use, guys. I'm sorry, it's too early. Mallerie swore no woman alive would entice him into matrimony, but on the high seas, he would be besotted by the high-spirited beauty whose love of freedom and adventure rivaled his own, and by an inescapable tidal wave of passion that threatened to engulf them both. So basically it sounds like she hides on the ship as a boy, and probably he discovers it right away, but she ends up being like a cabin boy to him. I've actually read this scenario a few times in historical romances, as well as one gay romance that I liked quite a bit where the same thing happened. Although he wasn't disguised as a boy, he was a boy. But anyway, Gentle Rogue with our Joanna Lindsey to the list. All right, for our H, I pulled out Kate Bateman's How to Fall for a Scoundrel. So this was her most recent release, and it's actually the beginning of a new series, so it's a perfect place to hop in. Though my very favorite series of hers is actually The Ruthless Rivals, if you want to read those of hers. But this one starts off Her Majesty's Rebels. And was this the most recent one, or was there a second one? There was. Second Dukes of Charm is actually the first one. Pardon me, those of you who noticed already. This is book 2 in the series. I'm sorry. The first one in this series is Second Duke's Charm. Apologies. But this read good as a standalone, because I just read this one and I had a great time. But this, Her Majesty's Rebels are this group of 3 women who've started a detective agency. But because no one would want to hire 3 women detectives, they basically say that they work under this guy who just never appears. So they named their detective agency Kings & Co. And Charles King is the name of this guy who owns it, but he actually doesn't exist. They just say he exists so people will hire them. And then there's this man named Harry who... he realizes that these women are running a rag, kind of, that do that. And so he pretends to be Charles King. And they can't really naysay him without him calling them out on their bluff. And it turns out he's actually an ex-con man who wants to make good. But he still wants something to stimulate his brain. He still wants something to keep him busy. So becoming a, detective for the good side is what he comes up with. So... Henry and Eleanor end up being paired up a lot to work on this certain mysteries together. And at first she just thinks he's an absolute scoundrel for wedging his way into their business. But quickly he becomes a part of the crew, and this was just very lovely. It was really great. So definitely check out Kate Bateman. Her books are usually not too long. The audiobooks are really fun, and she's just you'd be able to binge through her very easily. All right, we got to keep it moving, as I said. Some of these I'll talk a little faster about, I think, because I think they're more popular ones, and maybe I'll save my deeper explanations for the ones that people don't know. We'll see how it goes. For I, we have Indigo by Beverly Jenkins. You probably all guessed this would be on here. This one takes place in America during the, no, okay. It's before the Civil War, but this deals with kind of the Underground Railroad and helping slaves escape. And there's someone called Black Daniel who works the Underground Railroad in the North, that helps get people to the North. And then we have, he's also called Galen Vachon. I don't know how to say his name. And then we have Chester Wyatt, who's an escaped slave who is like a stop along on the railroad. And it's beautiful. The romance is wonderful. And it's as good as everyone says it is. Okay, it's fantastic. Okay, then there is Joss and the Countess for J by S.M. LaViolet, aka Minerva Spencer, one of my favorite historical romance authors. She writes it a little bit darker, a little bit sexier, and this series is The Seducers. This is actually book 2 in The Seducers. The first one is Melissa and the Vicar. Yeah. But this is actually about all ex-sex workers in this series who now have like different jobs that they're doing. So this one is Joss, and he used to work at a, sex club basically, or a brothel. That's the word I was looking for. And now he is a bodyguard to a widowed countess named Alicia Selwood. So yeah, she ends up really wanting him to do more than just protect her in the daylight. So there's that. The series is delicious. Highly recommend. Melissa and the Vicar is very good too. That one has a virgin hero, but he's a bit dominant for still being a virgin. We love it. Okay, for K, we have Kingdom of Dreams, Judith McNaught. This is on most lists of greatest historicals of all time. In my opinion, it really lives up to it. I also always have a soft spot for it because the heroine's name is Jennifer. Her name is also Jennifer Merrick, and I love it. This is a Scottish romance, and it is... she gets stolen from her convent school by a headstrong by Royce Westmoreland, the Duke of Claymore, also known as the Wolf. And so she gets kidnapped by him. And she is not going to go silently into that, and she's going to be much more trouble than he even knows. But I love this. This is one of the angstiest historicals that I've read, and I do wonder how much I would love it these days. No, I think I would love rereading it. I've reread it a few times, but I mean, the time that I read it, I was much more willing for higher angst when a book is this long, because this is quite a hefty read. But there are certain scenes in here that I'll just never forget, and they're scenes that could not be in historicals these days, right? This has those type of things where there's a lot of like, there's some dubious consent that's going on. There's a lot of discussions of like your just like bodily autonomy as well as being forced into certain things. This is also a medieval romance, so things are even a bit tougher for ladies back then, but there's a reason why it's on the best of all time, and if you haven't tried this one, highly, highly recommend. Okay, then for L, we have Lord of Scoundrels with Loretta Chase. This one, also on the list of greatest of all time. Okay, this one we have Sebastian, aka Bane, and we have Jessica Trent. Now, Jessica Trent, she is a spinster, and her brother, I believe, are they staying with her aunt? Sorry, it's been a long time now since I've read this. But either way what happens, her brother gets kind of involved with Bane. Now, Bane is this wealthy ne'er-do-well. He's seen as a lot of trouble, and Jessica and him are basically attracted to each other right away. But Jessica sees that he's trouble, and she is very protective over her younger brother. And when her younger brother gets involved with some of the things, she tells Bane, like, please send my brother home. Like, you are very wealthy. You can withstand hits to your credibility. My younger brother is going to get in debt, and he's going to lose everything. So please stop. And Bane is kind of like, who is this chit who thinks she can tell me what I want to do? And now he doesn't even like her younger brother that much, but now he decides he's going to make that guy his best friend. Okay, he's going to make her that man his best friend. And he's just a complete sassy asshole. Like, we'll just say it. And it also leads to him getting shot. I just said it. I won't tell you by who or how, but I will say there's a reason why Jessica Trent is one of the baddest asses women that you've ever read. And does Bane act like a petulant child many times? Yes, he does. But he also gets brought to heel by one of the most badass heroines in historical romance ever. And that's why you need to read this book. Because sometimes it's the female that needs a lesson, and sometimes it's the man. And not just because he is a rogue who needs to stop sleeping around. No, sometimes he's a petulant asshole like Bane and needs some shaping up. All right. Wait, okay, L, yes. And then we have M. And who do you think is going to be M? The Madness of Lord Ian Mackenzie by Jennifer Ashley, of course, has to make it known. This is my personal favorite historical romance of all time, so it had to be on here. Jennifer Ashley writes an absolutely magnificent story about a hero that we would probably consider on the spectrum these days. He's considered odd, he's considered mad, he's actually spent time in a madhouse. And we have a widow, Beth Ackerley, who is possibly going to be marrying one of his acquaintances. And so Ian goes to meet this woman at a opera and to see whether she's worthy or not of knowing that the man she's going to marry is just using her for her money. And Ian sees her and he's immediately enraptured, like all the way down to his toes. He's immediately enraptured with this woman, and it's a very different feeling because that's not something that Ian feels, right? But yeah, it's going to go from there. And it's my favorite romance in historical romance and in my top 5 romances of all time. You can tell this is a very well-loved book. So please do yourself a favor and read this book. Like, you'll be disappointed if you don't. Okay, then we have more Scottish. You can tell I have a bent of where I go with this. We have Never Seduce a Scot by Maya Banks. This is a book in the Armstrong Montgomery series, and this, or Montgomery Armstrongs, I said it backwards. And this one we deal with another heroine who has sort of like a disability, or she's deaf, and she's been deaf since she was a teenager. But because of the time period that this is told in, they think that she has went daft, is what they call it. She had a fever when she was young, and ever since then she hasn't been able to hear. And so they think that she went loopy. There's not like that. Those are the words they used then, that she went mad. But there is a feud between the Armstrongs and the Montgomerys, and the king is not happy, or the duke, or who's ever in charge of this. He's not happy. And so he commands that there be a marriage between the families and that they get their shit together. And really the only opportunity is that because the one family is all sons and the other one only has one daughter, and that's Eveline. And so the only choice is that Eveline marry Graham. And Graham is not only annoyed because he's having to marry an Armstrong, but he's heard that she has the mind of a child. And being, you know, oh so wonderful that he is. I'm rolling my eyes because he is wonderful, but also the fact that that is our bar is pretty low. But he's like, well, I'm never going to have children then, because he's never going to force himself on someone who can't consent. And what I love about how Maya Banks tells this story is that it's not articulated that way, because this is historical, and a man wouldn't be saying because she can't give consent. But that's the feel of it, which I love that she's able to convey, because to Graham, he's like, the king is forcing me to be a caretaker my whole life, because she's going to come live. She's going to need help because, again, of her diminished mental capacity. And I'm going to be a caretaker and never be a father or have my own family. But what he doesn't know, and what nobody knows, is that Eveline, she gets by just fine. She gets by just fine. And she may have played into her illness more than we know, because she wanted to get out of a marriage before that she didn't want. But when she meets Graham, something magical happens. She can actually hear/feel some of his voice, because it's in such a low register that she can feel it. So she can like hear some things, you know, the different frequencies like that, and his voice is one of those. And so when she first meets him, not only does she think he's one of the most handsome creatures she's ever seen, but she can almost hear him, and it just lights her up inside, because she's like, you know what? this could be my chance. This could be my chance. And so Graham thinks that he's being doomed to never have a family and to be a sacrifice for this peace deal. And he ends up getting one of the greatest treasures that he could have ever imagined. And this is one of my favorite historicals of all time, if you can't tell. I love them so much. I love them so much. It's wonderful. Okay, then we have O, and this is one, it's been a long time since I read, and it is the only book I've read by this author, but I want to read more. We have One Night is Never Enough by Mallerie. And this book, just to briefly say, because again, it's been a long time since I've read this one is about Roman Merrick, and he gets everything that he wants, and he really wants Charlotte Chatsworth. She's this beautiful jewel of the ton, and so what he does is he engages her debt-ridden father, who's a gambler, in a game, wagering 10,000 pounds against one night with his beautiful daughter, and Roman never loses. And so he wins, and Charlotte is devastated to learn that her father has lost her in a card game, isn't that the way, to the most dangerous man she's ever met. So with the threat of ruin behind her, Charlotte embarks on a perilous path with a man she cannot forget. So they have this one night together, but Roman has everything to lose, is what this says here, because the game that he's undertaken is not so much about winning her, but he's gambling his heart. So this book, I don't want to spoil some things for you, but I really need to read more Mallerie. I do own a lot of them because she doesn't have a ton of books. She doesn't have a ton, and I've actually bought most of them. So I really need to try some more of her books. But I love this book. It's really, really good. She's not talked about enough. So give this one a go. It has a beautiful cover too. There we go. All right. Then we have P, and for that, there's Poppies and Silk by Tanya Fisher. This is an author that I'm always trying to pimp out there, okay? Love her. This is part of the Texas Bloom series. The first one is called Letters to Dogwood, which is pretty good, but it was the author's debut. Then there is Poppies and Silk, and then there is Trail of Sunflowers is the third book. So this one is about a widowed seamstress named Poppy, and she ends up going back to a town that she stayed in for just a little while when she was younger, because she has a friend there, and they're starting this kind of like seamstress business together. And so she uses a bit of the money left over from like from being a widow to kind of get there and get started. And there she meets Sol Williams, who he's not looking for love, but when he sees this quiet, beautiful woman, and she offers to make a dress for his younger sister, they begin on this summer affair that for her is just so nice to be with someone who's as kind as Saul, but Saul is quickly falling head over heels for this woman, and he's getting in deeper than he ever imagined that he would. And it's just great. This is, you know, Western, it's an American historical, but this author does such a great job with her story. It's a bit dark too. Definitely check the trigger warnings for these. But she's just criminally underrated, y'all. Go read her. Go read her. Okay, then we have R. Yes, because, nope, PQ. We missed Q. Okay, Q is one of the ones I haven't read, but I've never read this author before, but I want to. So I pulled up one. So for Q, we have The Queer Principles of Kit Webb by Cat Sebastian. I've heard wonderful things about Cat Sebastian, who writes, as you might assume, maybe from this one, queer and LGBTQ historicals. I know there are some sapphic ones that they've written and some MM. There is, I believe, even some, is it transgender or else like hidden identity ones like that? I don't know. I haven't read this author at all, but I've heard good things. So anyway, this was one that was a trade paperback actually, and it has such a cute cover here. So this one says, Kit Webb has left his stand and deliver days behind him, but dreary days at his coffee shop have begun to make him pine for a heady rush of thievery. With a handsome yet arrogant aristocrat storms into his shop, Kit quickly realizes he may be unable to deny whatever this highborn man desires. In order to save himself and beloved friend Percy, Lord Holland must go against gentlemanly behavior he holds dear to gain what he needs most. A book that once belonged to his mother. A book his father never lets out of his sight and could be Percy's savior. More comfortable in silk-filled ballrooms than coffee shops frequented by criminals, his attempts to hire the roughly hewn highwayman formerly known as Glad Hand Jack proves equal parts frustrating and electrifying. Kit refuses to participate in the robbery, but agrees to teach Percy how to do the deed. Percy knows he has little choice but to submit. As the lessons in thievery begin, he discovers thievery isn't the only crime he's desperate to commit with Kit. But when their careful plan goes dangerously wrong and shocking revelations threaten to tear them apart, can these stolen hearts withstand the impediments in their path? So, there we go. That is for Q. All right. So, then we have R. Which, have I done this right? P, Q, R. Yes, now I need to check my alphabet. We have Return of the Rogue by Donna Fletcher. Donna Fletcher has some beautiful books. She has the one that Bound to Highlander, is that what that one's called? Wow, I can't even remember. But this is the beginning of the tale of the four brothers, I believe. Is it this one? Actually, I've just lied. This is the Sinclair brothers. Sorry. This author's books do blur together a bit. They're all Highlander romances. And this one, okay, so this one is Honora was supposed to marry the oldest brother in this one family. But for quite a few years, he's actually been kidnapped and held prisoner by barbarians. And so now she's set to marry the next brother, I believe. But she's thrilled when the marriage is arranged to the son of a Scottish laird. But then her betrothed is revealed to be Cavan Sinclair. Though the savage warrior once saved her life, Honora knows no one can tame the heart such of Root, no matter how finely chiseled his features or how enticing his eyes. But after escaping his captors, Cavan is concerned about protecting his clan. He also feels a little bit savage himself after the way he was treated by the barbarians. So he doesn't know if he can be a good husband to someone as like gentle and sweet as Honora. But yeah, really like this series. She writes some really good stories for sure. Okay, S, we have Secrets of a Summer Night by Lisa Claype. Again, one I won't go into much. This is the beginning of the Wallflower series. Am I right? Yes. This is book one. See, my brain is just struck. Yes, see, look, way back when, I even put a note for myself. Wallflowers #1. And this one is about Simon and Annabelle. So the Wallflowers are these four friends who are determined to help each of them find husbands. And first up is Annabelle. Simon Hunt, he's made it clear that he's not looking for a husband, but he wants to make Annabelle his mistress. And Annabelle needs a husband, not a protector. So they are at odds for that. All right, then we have T, which is To Tame a Scandalous Lady by Elena de la Rosa. So this made me so happy. I actually have a lovely signed copy here. I got this when I went to Book Bonanza in 2023. And this is a series that has some very unique situations going on. I really like it. But this one has, and there's also like lots of horses involved in this one. So this one, is this the first in the series or this one the third one? Yeah, I think this one's later on in the series because basically this one has Christian Andrews is trying to rebuild his racing stock. And so he hires someone, a trainer, and it's actually Lady Flora who goes undercover as a horse trainer. So that's this one, To Tame a Scandalous Lady. Love it so much. The audiobooks are really good for this series as well. Okay, then for you, we have Unclaimed by Courtney Milan. And I couldn't find my copy for some reason, so I'm just going to get it from down here. But this series is the Turner series. This is book 2 in this series. I love Courtney Milan so much. I highly recommend you give her books a go. This one is about Jessica, who's a courtesan, and she's not a gentle lady, but she gets sent to try to ruin the reputation of Sir Mark. So Sir Mark is this man. He's written this book about, it was very controversial because it was about, like, how do we describe this? He's a bachelor. He has irreproachable character. He's written a book about like virtue, for male virtue. Okay. And I can't get into the whole thing right now because there's so many layers to it, but a lot of people don't like this because it feels very like preachy. And the thing is though, Mark's intention of this book, I'll just put that out, is about men needing to be more virtuous. It's very clear when you read his book that it's about men needing to be more virtuous. But the way that a lot of men in society have taken this book is the fact that it's women who lead men to be unvirtuous, and it actually pisses Mark off so much. There's so much more to this book than to say, but I just want to put that out there because I think it might interest you to hear that, because Jessica, she gets sent to try to ruin his reputation, to try to tempt him into sinning and prove that he's not as holy as he seems, when the truth is, like, Mark was never trying to be as holy as he seems. It's other people who've put that on him. He was just trying to write a book that encourages men to be responsible for their own sexuality and not push it onto women, which again is not the way that society tries to take it. And it makes him very angry. But anywho, that's you, Unclaimed. Then we have for V, The Viscount Who Loved Me by Julia Quinn, right? Book 2 in the Bridgerton series. This one is Anthony and Kate, and I adore them. Okay, look at that. It's beautiful. He's the oldest Bridgerton sibling. He needs to find someone to marry, but he, in his own foolish mind, believes he won't live to be older than his father ever was. And so he plans to marry, give a woman a baby, and then never love her because it'll be less painful for her when he dies if she never loves him. He's crazy. But then we have Kate, who her younger half sister is who they are trying to pair up with Anthony, but she doesn't think he's good enough for her sister, and round they go in this merry game until they end up together. Okay, UBW, we have When the Earl Met His Match by Stacy Reed, one of my 6-star reads from 2023. I absolutely love this book. This one is about Lady Phoebe Maitland, who has found herself in the family way, and her family wants to shove her away till she has a baby and take her baby from her, and she doesn't want that to happen. And then we have Hugh Winthrop, who is actually a speechless hero. He's mute. He can hear, but he can't speak. He does do some sign language. I think he has some sign language, right? Yes. But they had actually been writing letters to each other for a different reason other than being together. And when she finds out that her parents are going to try to, as we said, get rid of her child, take her child from her, she runs to him. Now, she doesn't know that he's an earl, or will be an earl when his father dies, and that she would be like damning him to have a bastard child. She just is looking for someone to be there for her and her baby. And the thing is, what she doesn't know is that Hugh is more understanding of this situation than just about any other man she could have ended up with. And because he's determined to never love his wife, he's like, this is perfect. I'll marry her to save her, and then it'll just be an arrangement. Like, I won't have to love her or anything. But I mean, that's not going to happen, right? But I love this. It's so good. There's so many beautiful moments in this one, and the way that he loves his adopted child of her, like, it's so good. It's so good. Okay, so then we have W, we have an X. Now this one, I had to go with an X in the title. It doesn't start with an X, but there is 3 Weeks with Lady X, and we have Eloisa James, and this one is one of her spin-offs from another series of hers. But this one, oh, what a fake out. There's no step back in this one. But this one is about Lady Zenobia India, and about Thorn Daughtry. So he's a powerful bastard son of a duke, but he decides he needs a wife, and so to marry a lady, he needs to acquire a civilized facade, and so that's the specialty of Lady Zenobia. And so exquisite, headstrong, and independent, India vows to make Thorn marriageable in just 3 weeks, but neither Thorn nor India anticipate the forbidden passion that explodes between them. Thorn will stop at nothing to make India his. Failure is not an option, but there is one thing that will make India his, the one thing Thorn can't afford to lose, his fierce and lawless heart. All right, and then we have Y, and for that we have Yours Till Dawn with Teresa Mados. This is lovely. It's a bit of a Beauty and the Beast retelling. We also have another disabled hero. This hero is blind, and he was actually blinded in an accident. And Gabriel Fairchild is his name. And during battle, he loses his eyesight and his hope of the future. He becomes abandoned by his fiance, and the man who once walked like a prince is now hiding away in his family mansion. So prim nurse Samantha Wickersham arrives at Fairchild Park to find her new charge behaving more like a beast than a man. And determined to do her duty, she engages the arrogant Earl in a battle of both wit and wills. And although he claims she doesn't possess an ounce of womanly softness, she can feel his heart racing at her slightest touch. As Samantha begins to let the light back into Gabriel's life and his heart, they both discover that some secrets and some pleasure are both explored in the dark, are best explored in the dark. This book has a wonderful twist to it. It has a beautiful story, and I love this. It wasn't the first Teresa Mados I read. I did read one of her vampire books before, but it led me to want to read more, and I've read a few more. She has a very wonderful backlist, and this story is just, it's so beautiful. I love it so much. So there we go. Somehow we kept this under an hour. I'm so proud of myself. So I think I did it. That is 25 different authors and 25 different books. I didn't find a Z. Please let me know if there's one with a Z that you would add. But for the most part, as I said, I've read all of these except for 2, and they're authors that I want to try. So thank you so much for watching this. If you love historical videos, please make sure you interact with this video. People always request historical videos, but then they don't do super well on my channel. So if you like this, please make sure that you give it a like, that you're subscribed to the channel, that you leave a comment, whether it's just some hearts or give me a recommendation for one of the harder letters, maybe. I don't know. Tell me which of these are favorite authors of yours, all that good stuff. So thank you so much for watching, friends. I'll see you next time. Bye.